Greetings, wrestling fans and newbies alike. Welcome to our wrestling show, where we determine who really won the Monday Night War.
For those who don't know, back in the 90s, WCW and WWF, now WWE, were the two biggest wrestling promotions in the country. And they went head-to-head every Monday night with their programs Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro. And what we're doing is a chronological, week-by-week breakdown and review of every episode of that Monday Night War. We've spent the last 18 months watching every WCW and WWF event from January of 1993 up until September of 1995, which is where the Monday Night Wars start. The first thing we're going to get into is the first episode of Nitro, which actually ran unopposed. Raw was on a break that week. So this isn't officially the Monday Night Wars, but it's laying the groundwork for it, so let's get into it. At this time, WCW is coming in fresh off of the 1995 Bash at the Beach pay-per-view. This show is shot at the Mall of America, which is kind of a strange location to see a wrestling show. You can see people going up and down the escalators in the background, and it's odd to see there's very few signs in the crowd. Like a few years later, there's going to be signs everywhere. Yeah.
The announce team for this episode is kind of odd. We've got two names that we do know, Eric Bischoff, Bobby Heenan. We also have Steve Mongo McMichael, who is a college football player who's just coming off of his NFL career.
Yeah, he was with the Green Bay Packers before this, and he did make an appearance in the WWF a few months prior, though, when Bam Bam Bigelow was having his feud with Lawrence Taylor. He was, accompanied to the ring by a bunch of different football players, and I don't know, it didn't really go anywhere. But he's not completely unfamiliar with wrestling, but it is weird to see him on the announce team, and it's also interesting to note that they have a 3-person announce team as opposed to 2, as we've been used to seeing on most of the shows up until this point. WCW was one of the first major promotions to give a lot of airtime to luchadors, smaller guys, and more high-flying type matches that became the norm eventually. So this first match that we're going to see on the card is Jushin Thunder Liger versus Flyin' Brian Pillman. I thought this was a really interesting match. There's a lot of reversals, a lot of high spots, and kept a really good pace for me.
Yeah, I thought it was the strongest match on the card of this night compared to the other two matches that will follow.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Those are kind of more entertainment-based.
Yeah, a lot of gimmicks in the other matches, but this is just some really good, really interesting, exciting wrestling. And a lot of stuff that you weren't seeing in WWF, and I think they are definitely setting themselves apart.
Liger and Pillman have great chemistry in this match. They're very fast-paced, and they know how to complement each other's styles. That said, it's very cut and dry, even though it's really entertaining. Brian Pillman takes the win with a reversal.
Before we get into the next match, we have to go visit the Pasta Mania restaurant. This is a really interesting segment. Hogan is endorsing a spaghetti restaurant, or they probably have other kinds of pasta. I don't know.
And with Pasta Mania running through my brain.
He refers to as Pasta Maniacs. He cuts a promo there in front of the store with all the fans all around him.
And Jimmy Hart.
Jimmy Hart's there. It's a Pasta Mania moment. I've seen images of this online, but I never knew it was like a thing that appeared on a WCW program. It's
very special.
It's really special. Ugh. Moving on to the next match, we have what I'd call some pay-per-view quality booking with Ric Flair versus Sting. However, the match itself isn't quite as good as I had hoped. Arn Anderson comes in, interferes, and strikes Flair, and the match is thrown out. However, what's more interesting than the match itself was that Lex Luger appeared at the top of the match, and they're doing the whole, what's he doing in here? He's an intruder kind of angle, because to everyone's knowledge at that time, Luger was still signed to the WWF. Now, he was actually just working on a sort of handshake agreement there. His contract had run out, and he wound up jumping ship to WCW. Eric Bischoff arranged this. There was a whole element of surprise, and it's a little bit of a foreshadowing of the same sort of invasion element you'll see later when Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, again, jump ship from WWF to WCW, and we see the start of the NWO Outsiders angle.
When we do see Luger in the crowd, He looks kind of goofy wearing a big white shirt that makes him look like he is some sort of, I don't know, pirate chef.
Yeah, I'd say pirate chef is a good way to describe the look that Luger has.
It's very bizarre compared to where he's coming from, which is a like Mr. America angle.
Yeah, he's kind of fresh off of the whole Luger Express World Tour where WWF was trying to push Luger as the new all-American hero type character after Hogan left the company. And he went on a bus tour across the country and just showed up places and did signings. There's uncut footage of the whole thing. Not the entire bus trip, but hours and hours of footage of the bus trip up on the network right now. It's worth pawing through. So while Luger doesn't really do anything yet at this point in the show, somehow there's a lot of confusion. Randy Savage and Scott Norton are there. And Scott Norton runs out
of nowhere.
Yeah, the cameras aren't really fixed on this part of the action, so it's very confusing to me.
We didn't even really understand who it was. We had to go back and listen to him.
Essentially, Scott Norton saying something about, I signed the paper or something.
Contract.
Yeah, they don't really explain it. Maybe it's something that we missed in like a previous episode of a WCW show, but basically, they're laying the groundwork for Scott Norton to wrestle Randy Savage on the following week's episode of Nitro. The one thing I do want to mention about this spot is that if you look right here, Bobby Heenan like grabs this woman's head and shoves her. It's
a very bizarre move. It's kind of like he's trying to save her and also push her away.
Yeah, I think he's like holding her at first, but then he just like
kind of rolls
like,
her
dunks
head.
Her.
Right?
Yeah. I don't get it. Very odd segment, very chaotic, very confusing. I'm assuming it was just a live TV thing and they weren't cutting to the right camera quick enough, but who knows?
But that's just one more thing to add to the weirdness of this first episode.
Very weird episode. Very good episode, though. Pretty good.
Probably still better than Raw at this point.
Yeah, WWF is really in the pits right now, as we'll discuss before too long. This first episode of Nitro is pretty short. It's 45 minutes. You know, it was probably an hour runtime initially with commercials. The show goes on to be 3 hours eventually, later on down the line. But we get to the last match pretty quickly here. It's Big Bubba Rogers versus Hulk Hogan. I was confused when I saw Big Bubba Rogers. He was the boss, and he was the guardian angel. And I think people probably know him best as the Big Boss Man in WWF, but they didn't have the rights to that name, so they were bouncing all these different characters around, but I'd say Big Bubba Rogers is probably the worst of all his aliases. I think even the Guardian Angel was better, but that was still kind of a politically charged, controversial sort of angle. So maybe Bubba Rogers works for now, but the boss was fine.
Yeah, for as cool as his character is, it kind of makes it seem like a weird pairing for him to be with such a big name and kind of something that lacks.
Yeah, he doesn't have that like authority figure kind of vibe that he has when he's in the full trooper outfit or whatever, you know, the police type uniforms they wears as the boss man, whether it's like a CO kind of look or state trooper, I don't know. It's really lacking here. He just looks like a big southerner.
Yeah.
This is a really by the book Hulk Hogan match. There's some back and forth. Hogan eventually hulks up. He starts no-selling everything. And for anybody who doesn't know, no-selling is where you get hit, but you don't react. You act like you don't even feel it. And that was kind of Hogan's whole thing for a long time, was hulking up and letting the power of the fans or Hulkamaniacs give him superhuman strength to withstand any blow from any man and just win the match. And it's one of those matches up until the point that the Dungeon of Doom, who we'll get into at some point. Dungeon of Doom is a sort of motley crew of villains put in place to become obstacles to Hulk Hogan's path to maintaining the world championship. They interfere. Lex Luger comes out to the ring, clears them all out.
Whoa, wait a minute!
And it culminates in Luger setting up a match for the following week's Nitro against Hogan, I think for the belt. And that brings us to the end of the first episode of Monday Nitro. Now, this show that we're doing, we want to take Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro and put them head to head and actually assign points to each episode. And we will calculate at the end of their sort of run against each other. Now, we know that WWF did win the war. They bought out WCW and it's all said and done. But who, point for point, tit for tat, really won? Who came out on top? Is it WWF? We don't know.
But we're going to find out.
So the programs are being judged on best outfits, best signs in the crowd, best overall match of the night, best commentary of the night, best promo/storyline. So we're going to look at all those different elements that make up an episode of Raw or Nitro and see who, week to week came out point for point on each of those categories. Something you'll see initially is that WCW has a bit of an advantage because they're live every week. WWF didn't go live with Raw on a regular basis for quite a while. They were pre-taping several episodes and doing one live episode, and WCW definitely uses that to their advantage. At this point, WWF is on a short break from broadcasting because of the US Open, and they're coming off of the SummerSlam 1995 pay-per-view, which we just rewatched, and I'd say that really sucked.
Yeah.
It's a really bad pay-per-view. The highlight is probably Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels in the ladder match. Nothing else about that night stood out to me.
Somehow that wasn't the main event. The main event was King Mabel versus Diesel.
Yeah, for the belt. And they were trying to push this King Mabel angle. You might know Mabel better as Viscera later under the Ministry of Darkness with The Undertaker. But this is a really rough patch for WWF. And previously, he was part of the Men on a Mission tag team, and they tried to give him a solo push. He was, from what I've read, a very unsafe worker and injured people. So, I don't know. Not main event status to me, but that's what we got there. As we go forward, we'll also be taking a look at what's happening in the ECW at this time. That's Extreme Championship Wrestling, which was arguably the third biggest promotion in the country during the mid to late 90s, and they really were sort of a precursor to the Attitude Era that we saw in the, again, mid to late 90s in the WWF. Everything with DX, Suck It, Stone Cold, the NWO, the middle fingers, the beer, the violence, the hardcore wrestling. That's all stuff that ECW was bringing and was pretty much copped, note for note, by these other companies. A lot of characters that you come to love in WWF or WCW were first appearing in ECW. Cactus Jack, even the Stone Cold character.
Stunning Steve.
Stunning Steve, when he, was working for ECW, he was basically doing a prototype Stone Cold character. And it's really, really crazy to see because I didn't get to watch a lot of ECW when I was growing up. I watched a lot of WCW and a lot of WWF, but I couldn't even find ECW on TV half the time. So having the network and be able to go back to these episodes, it's blowing my mind seeing all these characters and angles done first and sometimes done better by ECW. So I just want to mention two more things before we sign off. One, I want to make an acknowledgement to Wrestling Bios, who recently launched a very similar series looking at a sort of note for note, simultaneous look at WCW and WWF during the Monday Night Wars. Now, we've been working on this project again for the last 18 months or so. It took us a while to get it off the ground and get it shot and edited and posted. But
even painted this wall for it.
We did. Try to make a little set and everything. Someone's doing something similar, but there's no shortage of people talking about wrestling on the internet. So we do want to give a shout out to that channel. Check out Wrestling Bios. We'll have a link down there as well.
It's a great channel.
Yeah.
It's very informational, especially for a new watcher, learner like me.
The other thing I want to mention is If you want to see our review of the first sort of head-to-head of Raw and Nitro, we have early access to all episodes on our Patreon. We have a link down there. You can get it now. We're not putting anything behind a paywall. It'll show up on the YouTube channel soon. And I'd say that's it for now. Peace.
This is our wrestling show. Signing off.
Oh, what in the hell is he doing here? Get the camera off of here. What? Look. Get him out of here. Get the camera off of here. What is this?
Oh, wait a minute. He's got a right to be where this is a public mall.
Get him out of here. Somebody call the security guards.